Schönen guten Abend, good evening, a warm welcome to the Urbanize Festival at the Architekturzentrum and happy birthday, dérive. Like many others, I cannot imagine any longer Vienna without Urbanize. And I'm delighted that you are back now at the AZW with a very crucial and a very interesting topic, the relationship between planning and time. When I started at the AZW in 2017, the Urbanize Festival Center was actually located right here at the Architekturzentrum, a very nice cooperation at the start of my work here. And at the same time, the AZW was curating a public workspace at the Nordbahnhof together with many wonderful colleagues and supported by the Climate and Energy Fund. And back then, the question of conflicting time regimes, of how different actors in urban planning move at different speeds, was already a central concern. And now, next door, you can visit our exhibition Abundance Not Capital, and there the relationship between time, material, and labor is very crucial, and we think that this relationship is also very crucial in challenging the logic of capitalism. Anyone engaged in planning must be at least a little bit optimistic. Although things look very bad and getting worse, one has the feeling, but if you're involved in planning, you have to be optimistic, believing that the future is something that can be shaped and can be changed. In this sense, I'm very much looking forward to the contributions today, planning the future of space, and a warm thank you to the Urbanize Festival, and the whole team, of course, of the Urbanize Festival, the team of the AZW, Lene, who is kind of migrating between Urbanize and AZW, Mike Novotny for moderating, and of course our wonderful guests. I wish you all an inspiring evening. Thanks.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for the introduction. Also, congratulations to the even Urbanize. I think it's been 25 years of dérive. Welcome to you all, and also I'm thinking of the past, like back in COVID times. So sort of hard to remember to welcome also people who are on live stream. So welcome today also people at home in front of your screens. I really like the fantastic motto of time, which you've chosen for Urbanize this year. I also like the decoration with the different clocks, so you can choose which one to focus on. If this makes you too nervous, you can focus on this one. It also reminded me that there's a long-term project, I think in California, which is called the Long Now Foundation, started by an artist in the 90s who are planning to build a clock which ticks once every year, and the cuckoo comes out every 1,000 years to sort of raise the awareness of long-term time scales. We don't have that much time today, so we're going to be a bit more compressed. So there will be no cuckoo today. Yes, time is the perfect theme and the perfect encapsulation. Angelika Fitz already mentioned it, of what architecture and planning is about. And it's so self-understood, we don't really often think about it, that when we plan, we always imagine the future. We imagine best case or worst case scenarios and scenarios in between. And we place them on a certain timeline, axis of years, and define the future. And we say, this will happen, that should happen. And then in the end, we have a before picture and an afterwards picture. We have a sequence of cause and effect, and we have a result. It's perfect, it's all planned and fine. And it works sometimes in reverse too. We see the results and we think, well, of course, if the result is successful, it was always destined to be that way, and everything went according to plan. But in most cases, things could have gone wrong on the way and certain points in time, and often they do go wrong, and the results are not as planned or don't come to pass anyway. But mostly, like Angelika said, architects are notorious optimists. They have to be and they want to be, and of course, they also know that planning does not happen in a vacuum, which is why architects and many others have tried to find ways to allow openness and inclusion in planning processes, chance and coincidence, and to solve the contradiction of planning the unplanned. But of course, you want a better future, you want to succeed, you don't want just anything to happen, you want good things to happen. So how to do that? Of course, you want to involve participation, democratic processes, strategies like tactical urbanism, temporary solutions, trial and error. Certain people have found interesting solutions for that, like the German jazz musician and urbanist Christopher Dell, who sort of transfers his theories of or experiences in jazz improvisation into urban planning, or Gabo Heindl with her strategy of non-solution, to name just two. Today we look at urban planning, which has a large scale both in time and place. How do we turn the present to the future, and especially we will discuss it also on the podium later in terms of climate catastrophe, when we have to be really fast and act and be decisive. Is there still time for openness and uncertainty? So we will start, because we are all optimists, with the best practice project and then follow up with a discussion. The best practice project is in Utrecht in the Netherlands. It's called the Katerijnensingel. I think it is, if you are active or passive on social media, you've probably seen it before together with the Jongjeon River Park in Seoul. I think it's one of the most frequently seen before and after pictures, where the after is better than the before. In 1969, at the peak of the car-friendly city, the canal, which it used to be, was turned into a 10-lane expressway. Many citizens in Utrecht didn't like that. And finally, they were successful. In 2002, a referendum voted in favor of turning the road back into a canal. But, as we will also learn in the lecture now, time is a tricky thing, and it took 15 more years until the planned result finally became reality. A blue-green infrastructure, which Utrecht is now very rightfully proud of, thanks to plans by the landscape architects Okra. And to tell us the history of the Katerijnensingel project, we welcome today Bas Heesels from Okra in the Netherlands. He studied garden and landscape design, and he has been a designer at Okra, Landschapsarchitecten, since 2013. Welcome to Vienna, Bas Heesels.
Let's see if it works. Yeah, there you go. Good evening all. I'll tell you about Utrecht and about the Katerijnensingel. Probably a lot of you have seen already the before and after pictures, as Mike says. We at Okra, we believe that we can design meaningful places. Places that can add something to the life of people, that can add something to your daily life on every level. Not just places that look good, but also places that make you feel good. At the moment, we're with about 45 to 50 people. We're also situated in Utrecht ourselves, which is great, so we can see our own project every now and then. It's not the only project that we've done in Utrecht. We've done more projects in Utrecht, but also we do projects in other cities in the Netherlands, but also in the UK, in Belgium, France, and more other countries. We focus on the urban setting of the landscape. And if you think of the fact that 73% of the people already live in cities nowadays in Europe, and it will even grow over time. In 2050, it will be approximately 82 people living in cities. It proves that making the city a livable environment is very important. How do we make sure that the density of the city does not become our enemy? We have to make sure that it becomes or stays a pleasant place to live. And therefore, we have to build livable cities. How do we do that? We believe that a city is not about cars. A city, it seems that a lot of cities are nowadays built for cars, with large motorways, with lots of asphalt, with very little space for pedestrians, for cyclists. We believe that by focusing on designing for people and not for cars, you can improve the city. You can improve old cities, you can improve new parts of the city. The Catharijnen-singel is a project in Utrecht, but it's nearly impossible to see it separately from the bigger perspective. So I will tell you a little bit about the bigger perspective in Utrecht. This is the Utrecht Central Station at the moment. It has developed over time into quite a pleasant area with an iconic bubble roof that lots of people know. Underneath this square, the station square, there is the largest bicycle parking in the world for, I think by heart, approximately 25,000 bikes, which means that if you have to bike to the station, you can virtually park your bike on the station and hop onto a train. I think that's a great thing, because it means that all people that have to get to the station can do that by bike and can also find a spot for their bike. And it also means that people that take the train don't take the car, which is the way to diminish the amount of cars in the city. If you look at the inner city of Utrecht, with top left the logo of the city of Utrecht, you can see that it has been brought back to a surrounded city, a city surrounded by green and by water. On the other hand, it's also good to see that if you check out the image on the left bottom, it's also part of the urban fabric. So this ring around the city, this green and blue ring around the city, is not a barrier, it's a connector. It's actually the front garden of the people living in the city, and not also very important, it's a climate adaptive carrier. So it cools down the city, and you can actually feel it if you, on a hot summer's day, if you walk out of the station area, or if you walk out of the inner city and you reach the single around the city, it's actually a few degrees cooler. And that makes a major difference in a big city, because Utrecht is a bit more than just this tiny city that you've just seen. We believe that healthy urban living is something that we can create in Utrecht, and in any city actually. This asks for a new balance in traffic, where this pedestrian always has the priority. Liveliness is also a very important thing, and liveliness that comes also from people and not from cars. Climate adaptation, I think we all know that we should do something about that, but not everybody's convinced of that apparently. The city of Utrecht is the fastest growing city of the Netherlands. At the moment there's approximately 350,000 people living, and it might lead up to 450 people in 2030 already, which means that we're really growing rapidly. If you see the image on the right, it shows that there's approximately 17,000 of those 350,000 people living in the inner city of Utrecht. That means that there's a lot more people not living in the inner city. This means that we're also going to have to focus on developing in a good way the other neighborhoods of Utrecht and the other cities of Holland and the other cities of Europe. What we're busy with at the moment is making 3 linear or loop-shaped parks in Utrecht. The middle park is already made in the western neighborhood of Leidse Rijn. It was designed by West 8. The right, you recognize, of course, that's the single park, which was just brought back to life, let's put it that way, in approximately 2017. And at the moment we're also working on the Rondje Stadseiland, which is virtually an island in between two large canals in the west of the city as well. That is an important area for the development, housing development of Utrecht. One of the neighborhoods at one of these canals is Merwede. We made this design together with an urban design office, and it shows that it shows quite a high density, let's put it that way, absolutely. But we believe that making high density neighborhoods, making large-scale buildings, can work if they but only if they go hand in hand with high-quality public space. So we believe that these spaces, they should be in balance. We developed a so-called Merwede biotope, which means that we thought about how do we make sure that the green is a bit more than just a lawn and a tree here and there. It can be a multi-layered approach and therefore become of great value for the neighborhood. Also, it should be on a lot of layers in the neighborhood. It can be on roofs, it can be on facades, and it should, very importantly, create a network. It shouldn't be isolated, it should be a series of green spaces, a series of green an ecological approach, let's put it that way. This is how that can look in the, This is an example of how it could look and how these corridors can take shape. There we go. Back to the Catharijnen single. This is how it looks when you go there nowadays. But we all know that it hasn't been like that for all the time. This is when you look at the space in 1969. They just had finished what they later called the shortest highway in the Netherlands, which was a very strange thing. I will show you later on the map. It was really the road that led from nowhere to nowhere. But still, some politicians thought it was a very great idea. And people already protested against it at the moment that it was made, and they never really stopped protesting until the moment in 2002 that finally politicians said in this referendum, or finally people said in this referendum, bring it back. So it was brought back. And I think the difference that you can see from, this is seen from the south side. Here you can see the grown-up trees, the larger trees, because this was never removed. But then this is a picture seen from the north. And then just beyond that bridge is where we go on this moment. And then you can see that the trees are a lot younger. But the great thing is, of course, that the single is back and it's all around Utrecht. And it's also valued. People value it very much. We received a prize for it in 2022. And to show you some examples of what actually happened is, you can see it here. It really went from a concrete barrier to a blue-green connector. And that is the power of green and blue in the city. It will never be dividing parts in the city, but it will always be a connector. So we went from a car-minded area to an area where mindfulness could find a spot. We went from a gray channel to a thought, a design, to a very nice space. We went from traffic to other types of traffic. We went from very little space for trees to a lot more space for trees. We went from art to art in a different way. And we went from cars to people. I think that's the most important about the whole thing. Cars are not people. Cars are ways to move around, but it's not the way to move around. It's not the only way to move around. I think in my group of friends, who most of them live in Utrecht, most of them don't own a car. They just have a bike and a railway pass. This is what I talked about before, about the shortest highway in the Netherlands. It's a bit hard to see maybe, but I'll try to point at it. Does that work? Over here. See, it nearly has the width of the actual highway, but it just leads from nowhere to nowhere. And that shows that when this was made at the end of the 60s, they had plans of extending it towards the south and towards the north. And everybody's very, very happy that that never happened, because they would have demolished a lot of very nice neighborhoods. Utrecht has been growing since the year approximately 200. It was made on the northern edge of the Roman Empire. So where the Dom Tower of Utrecht is located, that is where the Roman fort used to be. Over time, the city evolved into this medieval city with a fortified wall around it. That wall was there until the 19th century, as you can see here. So it was either living in the city or living outside the city, and then outside the city, crops were grown, like vegetables and fruits and so on. And this is how it looked at the time, approximately, according to Joost Cornelis Droogsloot. And you see that Utrecht still had a skyline that you could see from a distance. You can still see a lot of these buildings actually are still there. You can still see them when you approach by train, for instance. Of course, the most remarkable one is the Dom Tower, which is the highest church tower in the Netherlands. You can see that in the 17th century, they started making the first expansions out of the city. So this is the Moreelse. You see at the bottom, they started to fill in these old crop fields, these old orchards into neighborhoods. And then eventually, the Katerijnensingel was not all the way at the edge anymore. If you check out the railway station around 1850, I don't know if you've ever seen the current, you have seen the current railway station, but if you've ever been there, it's a slightly different atmosphere than what you see here. This seems very much like an old estate-like space. What is the most remarkable about it is that it was still in front of the rail. The rail was over here, of course. The current railway station is built on top of the rails, so that created a bit of a distance, a longer distance between the railway station and the inner city. They thought in the 60s that they should try to bridge that, and connectivity in the 60s was very much linked to car-mindedness. So they thought that they were solving a problem by making it into a highway and developing in a very modernistic way, you could say. But it turned out that this connection wasn't really a connection, but it became more like a barrier. Here it says that the draining of the Singel can start this year. Newspaper of 3rd of February, 1968. Not that long ago, if you think of it. But this is when they started to drain it. The picture could have been taken around 2017 when they did exactly the same, but then the other way around. So that's interesting about it. from single to highway, indeed. That's what they were doing at that time. And then we ended up with lots of traffic, lots of asphalt, lots of paving, and the promise of a new world with cars. I don't know if we were very happy with that. And indeed, like I said before, the city separated into parts. What we're doing at this moment is, by bringing back the Katerijnen-singel, we bring back a green-blue bridge. We connect the old city to the new parts of the city. So this is, at the top you see the before, where there was still a large part of the single present. And at the bottom you see the after image. This is how it looks in section. Our design was very much inspired by the landscape architect Zocher, who made the design for the rest of the single park as well. So you could say it's a bit of Okra and a bit of Zocher. And after only, how much is it? 60 years of concrete channel, the canal came back. The single came back. And now people can enjoy. It's a great spot to hang out, to enjoy the biodiversity, enjoy the people enjoying it, enjoy the new sides of the city and the old sides of the city. I believe this could be the answer to densifying cities, as long as they go hand in hand with greening them as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bas. And we're going straight into the panel discussion. And I can welcome Nicole Kirchberger and Ute Schneider on stage, and I will introduce you in a second. So we will have like maybe half an hour, 40 minutes of talking here, and then of course we'll, as soon as possible, then we will also include you, the audience, also in the discussion. Nicole Kirchberger, sitting next to me, she studied architecture in Linz, Vienna, and Istanbul, and worked at the Amsterdam Urban Planning Department, and she is today the head of the Regional Urban Transformation and Climate Change Adaptation Department at the Austrian Climate and Energy Fund, Klima- und Energiefonds, which assists the government, the federal government of Austria in achieving its climate goals, and has already supported, I think, about 500,000 projects so far, 400,000-ish.
Actually, yeah, I don't know the exact number, but yeah.
Just, yeah, in general. So.
We were established in 2007, so we had a lot of time to do that.
Speaking of time, yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, welcome, Nicole. Ute Schneider studied architecture in Stuttgart, Karlsruhe, and Delft, and she collaborated in the Netherlands with KCAP Architects and founded their office in Zurich, where she has been a partner since 2016, and since 2021 she's been a professor here in Vienna at the TU Wien for urban design, and she is also involved in planning discussions in the public, for example, like the transformation of post-industrial sites of the AltWU campus, which we are quite busy discussing here every day. Welcome, Ute Schneider. So, as you might have noticed from these biographies, we have a bit like of a Dutch interest group here on stage. Everyone has a bit of a Dutch past.
Seems like it.
And I think we're going to stay in that area before we move on to general questions. maybe starting with you, Nicole, also from your experiences of working and planning in Amsterdam and looking at the Catharijne single project in Utrecht, would you say, is there something special about Dutch planning culture which you see in that and in this success story?
I think, well, there is certain things that I see. I think the Netherlands, they have a very old planning culture. For example, the city of Amsterdam, they were doing structural plans since the 1930s, I think. I think that's the earliest in the whole of the world. I mean, I think the Regional Planning Institute in New York, they also have very old structural planning plans, but I think the Netherlands, they had a very long, they have a very long culture of structural plans, and also I think there is since a longer time than in Austria, an inclusion of strategic planning, and I think coming from an institution that deals with innovation and research, there is a very close link between planning and research and innovation. Also, I think that's the polder hypothesis, as it's called. So the Dutch, they make the land and they have to deal with the water. So that means they have to be in consensus. They cannot just act alone, but they have to talk to the neighbors and to the adjacent landowners. Yeah, these are the things that I find. And also, there is an inclusion of the topic of dealing with water and climate change adaptation that is, I think, very inclined in Dutch planning culture, simply because water is such an intrinsic element of the Dutch landscape. Yeah, yeah. These were the I would say, yeah.
Udi, would you sort of add something from your own experiences also in urban planning in the Netherlands?
I went from the border of southern border of Germany, kind of facing Switzerland, kind of further north, because I was not aligned with kind of doing things always like they are, or like we did it 10 or 20 or 30, 40 years before, and went to the Netherlands. And I think and doing then my thesis project back at the university in Stuttgart after I've studied in Delft and also worked in the Netherlands already, let's say, really brought me back to this kind of what is the difference. And when I went to the Netherlands, I thought I go to a country where I nearly speak the same language and I will face the same culture. It's completely different. The language is, to a certain extent, like Swiss German, kind of in difference to High German, but there is what I call a collective, let's say, a Dutch collective consciousness about everything is constantly in a flow and in a change. And that is so intrinsic kind of in the planning culture because the whole country is man-made. 50% of the land is gained land. I have friends that live 7 meters underwater, below sea level. If you think about that kind of, and in the beginning I was really, when I started in Delft, I thought, so they don't need to read the news and they don't read kind of, let's say, what's globally going on with global warming already at that time. But if you know kind of how the country is developed and how it is made and how it's operated, it's so normal, they just do it constantly since ages. And that is what is really, let's say, the soul and the planning culture of the Netherlands. And without that experience, I would also not be capable to do the work I'm doing now. That informed completely, let's say, my way of thinking. And I think, for instance, to see kind of, and we do this, by the way, everywhere, kind of also to see that also Austria or Switzerland is completely cultivated cultural kind of landscape. We just don't see it so obviously kind of than we see it in the Netherlands. Because also Austria, also Switzerland have maybe a square centimeter of nature and the rest is cultivated landscape. We have to be honest about that, but kind of, and think about how we treat the planet. And I'm really curious also about the political decisions, let's say at the time, kind of how that changed, because Rotterdam and also Utrecht, I was working on New York Catharijne when I did an internship at Neutlingsriedijk at the time, after my studies in Delft. It was a place to not go, it was horrible, and it changed a lot. It's still very, let's say, an engineered place, and it's also kind of a very multimodal hub, But by this, let's say, neighboring kind of landscape and also opening and really transforming back streets into kind of green-blue infrastructure, and this happens all over the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, let's say Rotterdam, Eindhoven at the moment, we can really learn a lot because we also need it here.
Bas, I would like to stay in Utrecht just for a few minutes longer, and just a question about your presentation and about the project. I found quite interesting how the narrative changed about what separates and what connects. Like, it was basically the same in the 60s. They thought there's a separation, we make a connection by doing a 10-lane highway, and then you notice, no, this is actually a barrier, and we now have a new connection, which is blue-green infrastructure. But basically, the thinking was the same, just the methods were completely opposite. I was wondering, because this retransformation took quite a while, and also from what Nicole and Ute have said, there's also like a very public awareness of transformation and planning in the Netherlands. What role did the public play in the transformation back from the road to the canal, and the protests of the people, and what generated that change? What was the tipping point, and where maybe could it have gone wrong at some moment, and were there lucky points where you said, well, we were like that happened or that happened?
I think that the fact that the city of Utrecht started expanding was a very important part in the redevelopment of the Catharijnensingel, because the city council understood that if they would start densifying, that they also had to give something back. So I think that's how people started to speak up. That's when people started to raise their hands and say, I don't like it very much if you start densifying, but then for some reason it balanced out over the years. People could live with it a bit better when they saw that these improvements were taking place. So I think in a way it's a balance between politics and people as well.
But were there also like changes in the local government? Yeah.
That's what you call in the Netherlands poldering, is like always finding the best in-between option. So I think it's another example of Dutch poldering. Yeah.
And also like the aware that we're all in this together, and sort of we are all drowned together if things go wrong, basically. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyway. Since we've already sort of talked about transformation, we'll go back to Nicole, and maybe you can sort of also explain a bit what you are doing, what the Klimaenergiefonds is doing, and with your background in planning, maybe also like the difference between planning and transformation, because I mean we here in urbanize with dérive, and or you are readers of dérive, you know we are not talking about planning theory. It's going to be a bit dry and interesting. So the difference in terms of planning and transformation and your work.
Yeah. Maybe first of all, the Climate and Energy Fund is a fund that was established by the Austrian government in 2007, and it's our goal to support the government in reaching their climate goals and also in adapting to climate change. And there are the programs we have, some of them you might know, for example, the Klimaaktiv funding program. That's the program that funds all the new bicycle networks, the regional networks, but also the inner city networks. For example, Argentinierstraße is one of the very famous projects of that. Was also there was a Dutch consultancy, I think, for Argentinierstraße. This was funded by us. We work with industry partners, because there you can gain a lot. You can really reduce a lot of emissions in one project. But we also work with communities, with communes and cities. And in my team, we are called the Team for Regional and Urban Transformation and Climate Change Adaptation. In our team, there are all the programs that deal with cities, with regions, with buildings, and with climate change adaptation. And for example, we have Basically, what we do is we support this big transformation. And sometimes we support that in direct funding programs. For example, we have a program, it's called Mustersanierung. So since many years, we support the refurbishments of communal and also commercial buildings. So that is about 150 buildings in all of Austria, 30% of that schools that have been refurbished with that program. Not all of them are architectural beacons, but I think this doesn't matter, because what matters more is that there are also some architectural beacons, but not all of them. But what matters more is that you keep the existing built-up structure intact, and you don't add another new building, and you take another land. When I was preparing for this, I asked you again. I called you and said, I think we are not really dealing with planning, because actually we are dealing with transformation. And for us, it's not a linear process. Transformation or transition, which is, so to say, a slower form of transformation, is quite messy. It has very complex stakeholder structures, so that you have a process where you include diverse groups, or where you include different stakeholders, where you include decision makers, is really crucial in our experience. And it's still a normative, goal-oriented process. You want to reach, or in our case, you have a goal that you aim at. Yeah, so I was a bit confused about the planning questions, because, I think transformation is for us the better conceptual frame also to deal with these high complexities that we are facing.
It's also important because it's always also about narrative and how do you communicate that. It's different if you talk about planning or if you talk about transformation. Yeah. Ute, from your practice, and both practice and teaching, maybe because we also talked about how planning has transformed and what the difference between planning and transformation, like in urban planning, has there been any general change in what tools you use in terms of like the modern theory or approach? Okay, this very rational, like linear, like Nicole said, a linear approach to planning. We have an idea, you do it, you have the result. Something more circular planning or more inclusive planning. What is sort of the main, would you say?
I'd first like to react
theories.
to that, kind of being puzzled. Kind of when I came to Vienna, I was a bit puzzled about, let's say, how the notion planning is received, because transformation planning is for me transformation, and nothing more and less, and it's not linear, and we cannot face this linear. But I think there is something behind, and I still try to understand that, how here the notion of planning is interpreted. Because if you see what I think, let's say you can speak the same language, in that sense, kind of the country of the Netherlands is in a constant change. The whole planet is in a constant change, and it's by all of that what we are doing and what nature is kind of doing. And therefore, I was even in a TU, this discussion is that we talk now about transformation. So yes, planning is constant is about transformation, and I think the difference is, I think it's crucial. It's planning is not linear. We have to. It's a process that kind of changes over time. And we have to integrate changes in different parameters, in the climate, in stakeholders, economies, socioeconomic aspects, but also crises, whatever. Is it a pandemic? Is it an economic crisis? Is it another kind of global crisis? This has all an impact on planning, and therefore it's never linear. And I think this is the difference. And because I couldn't, when I came and I kind of, you have to do it this way. Sorry, I can't. This is just not how I work and how we work. And I think there is, this is exactly this looking into what do we have here? What is the substance? What has grown over time? And where did we took the wrong directions, like in the 60s and the 70s, and we did this everywhere. I was working in cities and studied in cities like Rotterdam and Stuttgart, and they are modernistically built. And what Rotterdam and Stuttgart at the moment, but Rotterdam and the Netherlands much more aggressive, taking the streets, the wide streets out of the city, taking the highways out of the city. The wethouder in the mayor in Rotterdam kind of wants to have one east-west connection. This is a complete different approach than the whole city is built. And I think what Bas was talking about is kind of looking into what kind of mobility modes do we have in the city and how close, let's say, what is the priority? And the priority, he said, pedestrians. When I came to Vienna, I was a bit irritated by the length of, let's say, how long you have to wait on a zebra to cross the street and how fast you have to go over the street. Because it was for me completely different than to what I'm used also in different kind of cities in the world, let's say in Europe. And I think there we really have to rethink which mode has priority, not also allowing for cars in the city, but on which level, how fast, and on what kind of streets, and not everywhere. It's pretty simple. And I think we still, and that's for me also interesting to hear then kind of where what you asked in the beginning already, where was the tipping point of kind of when the Dutch planners also started to change, because nearly the whole Netherlands, except Amsterdam, kind of because it had a historical center, was planned modernistically, with wide streets, kind of, if you drive into Rotterdam, you have 12 lanes. And then they are surprised if you narrow it down to 4 that you have a traffic jam. Sorry, if you know a bit about flows, you know that this cannot work. And I think that is a bit what we need to face, a bit kind of what are the consequences with each thing we are doing, and what does this cause kind of in a global, let's say, resource question or kind of concerning the climate.
Anyway, Bas, also like the success of the Kadijnesinger was also like more easy because the modern project wasn't, as you said, completely realized. If they had like built the whole, not just this trunk of the shortest highway in the Netherlands, but the whole thing, it would have been probably more difficult to sort of turn it back, no?
That would definitely be a big task, absolutely. But I was triggered by what you said, or what you both said, about planning not being a linear process. I think it shows that it can even be a back and forth process. That sometimes it takes courage as well to acknowledge that you've done something wrong and you should go back to where you came from. I think that's also a good thing. And what we see now in several projects in different cities in the Netherlands, for instance, Hengelo and Assen. Look it up sometime on our website. We've been we're improving the cities in a more integrated approach. It's not just public space design. It's also seeing together with the municipality where are the vacant buildings, where are vacant shops. These are town centers that used to have a lot of shops, and now only half of them is maybe occupied because of the fact that people order their stuff online. Then you can try to fill all these shops again, or like we're doing now together with these municipalities, just making the center area a lot smaller with shops in it, and then allowing housing in other parts of the city center. And that's more than just public space design. It's also improving the city as a whole, the buildings as well.
What do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was also, when you were presenting, kind of, I have a question how you, because you said kind of that the green-blue infrastructure is a connector, but I think also a street can be a connector if we design it differently, because we have also a canal here in the city, and we have canals in a lot of other cities. We had also a canal in London, which needed a very long time to be, let's say, an attractive space in the city. I think it's really, because you worked very much on the fringes, and how these fringes, kind of how can you access, let's say, that also Water Street is a street. But what can you do on the berm of a street or of a river, and also maybe of the berm of some rail corridors, and I think there is something kind of that is probably very strongly inherited also in your work, because it's very Dutch, kind of to work from a very early beginning with an engineer. So it's engineering and the design is always very connected, isn't it?
Yeah, at the same time. Yeah.
So it's also not consequently, so it's not coming later. So the engineer is not defining, and then you come as a designer and try to resolve the last bits and pieces. It's a very integrated, interdisciplinary work, and that is very much visible on that fringe between the waterway and the city, because there's a grey zone that kind of allows for animals, but also people to access, and the street can be the same.
I have a question. I would be interested in knowing if you think of the context here in Vienna. I don't know Vienna that well, but could you think of what would be your Katharijnenbaan that could be transformed back into a Katharijnensingel?
I think there's several examples.
There's several examples. The Danube, which if you come to the city and you hear the word about the Donau Canal, which is officially a channel, it's also, and then the Danube, and then you see them coming from the Netherlands, kind of knowing what is a canal and what is a river, then you're really puzzled. And I think the Wien River is something like that kind of, and this kind of question of, and this whole exercise of in the Netherlands about giving the river space to breathe, geef de rivier ruimte, we really have to inherit here and work on. It's the same.
We were supporting a project, I think around 2 years ago, or some years ago. They recently finished. They were actually last year at the Kunstbiennale. They could finally realize their work. But basically what they were looking at was the rivers of Vienna. There are a lot of rivers, especially in the west of Vienna, because there are all these old villages, and there would be a village where there was a river. But over time, they were all built up, and then there were big urban development projects, and they would go over those rivers. And this project, it was a very big interdisciplinary group from the BOKU, from the IPRI, a very big group, including engineers and ecologists and all sorts of people. They would look if you could bring the river back again. And there was one district where the district, the local district mayor, he was very interested, but in the end it didn't work out, and they tried in other places. One of the results was that the Alserbach, that would have the biggest potential to bring it back again. It didn't work out so far, but for the project, the good thing was they are now working with a smaller municipality near Vienna, and they are really bringing back one river, and even there they are combining the river and the water, and they are taking with heat pumps the warmth, so they combine this again also with energy provision. So even though sometimes a project doesn't work out, it works in another place, and maybe the Alserbach is there still at some point. Yes, still potential. At least we know where we can start, so to say.
Like Mike said in the beginning, where architects, designers are positive thinkers, but you should also definitely be a long-term positive thinker. That's necessary sometimes. So keep on fighting for it, and over time it might emerge at some point.
Which wonderful brings me to my next question, sort of the core question, also like basically the headline of the event tonight, like adaptive planning strategies to all of you. What best practice examples, or from your own experience, can you think of? How can you plan and be adaptive to something which happens in the future which you don't really know about, basically? So what planning tools do you have? What frameworks do you have? What do you define what will happen on the timeline in the future, and how do you allow future events or people, different policies, different strategies to come in there without sort of it all falling apart and everyone doing just something? So what can you think of? Where do these things succeed? What examples are there?
Yeah, I think one crucial thing is kind of if we talk constantly about flexible development frameworks. So not about a master plan, but kind of more a flexible development framework. So what do we need to fix? And I think this is coming strongly out of the scenario planning kind of theory and culture of the Netherlands. To think in different scenarios and looking into what do you need to fix and what you keep open. I think we are far too much over-controlling and over-planning here, and also in a lot of other cities in Europe. To think in different kind of time frames, and we have, let's say, to really we call it also once in a while a playing field with some rule sets, to be capable to adapt to changes of external parameters, because we cannot look into the glass ball. And that is the difference in a plan, kind of, that a plan is just, let's say, a blueprint. I just this morning showed to students, and I constantly show this kind of two plans of Sir Christopher Wren, London, 1666 after the big fire, and how it is worked out. It's really interesting to see, because you hardly find kind of anything except the church in the middle that is the same, and the rest is the result of a negotiation process over time. And this is planning. Let's say, as we understand it, and being flexible to adapt to these changes, because they will anyhow come. I'm not afraid of.
Nicole, obviously, if the Klimaenergiefond, if the fund if you support projects, it is of course sort of, in general, if you fund something, you want to have a good result and say, okay, now we can see where we put our money and it was worth it. So something which is sort of very open is maybe, is that going against what you're doing?
No. But I would like to say something first, because certain things we do know, certain things are not uncertain. And I would like to, if I can have an interactive moment, who of you knows den österreichischen Sachstandsbericht, is the second Austrian report on climate change? Who of you knows it? And yeah, who of you has maybe not? Yeah, very few people. It's fair. That's very understandable, but it should be more known. That's why I'm telling you about it. So it's basically a report. It's a study, a meta-study, a study about studies that collects the most relevant studies about climate change in Austria and makes a meta-study. And so it tells you what's basically... It tells you with high probability how things are going to work out. What we know is that since the pre-industrial era, in Austria the global temperature has risen already 3.1 degrees. This is because we are an inland country, and it's simply the landmass warms up stronger than the sea does, so the Netherlands will not have this problem, you will have other problems. And also we are an alpine country, so this is also a reason why we will be strongly affected by the climate crisis. This means heat is going to increase, droughts are going to increase, heavy rain is going to increase, and mudslides. We don't know the year exactly, but we know that, so to say, one wet year might be followed by a dry one, might be again followed by a wet one. We don't know the exact year, or we don't know the month or the day, but we know that it's coming, and we know that it's coming quite fast. And so this means that now the 2 billion a year is spent on the, so to say, on repairing the damage. In 2030, this will more than double. So we know that, Ute, as you said, it's coming. We exactly know that it's coming quite fast and quite strongly. It's there, exactly. But this report also tells you what to do, and it basically tells you that we still have to, of course, and that's now I'm coming to your question, which projects do we fund? We have to increase on climate protection. We have to we have to save up more resources, we have to save to speed up on material efficiency, so use less material, and we have to adapt to climate change. And we know that what you do before, what you do now, is much more cost effective than later repairing the damage. Concerning the projects or the programs that we fund, we are defining strategic goals for each program. In all of that deals on Wirkung, so what has the most effect. And we are working with international juries that then decide on the projects. That's so for the research projects. And the other thing that we fund, especially in my team, is we collaborate a lot. So we are also, so to say, have a polder model. I just realized that. We collaborate with smaller communities and regions, so the climate and energy regions. And then is another type of region, the climate change adaptation regions. And we have 130 climate and energy regions in more than 1,100 communities in Austria. And we have 90 climate adaptation regions in also 900 communities. And also we collaborate from the more innovative side with cities, together with the BM-IMI, and there we collaborate with almost 50 cities in Austria. So this means, besides funding projects, really supporting the stakeholders in the cities, in the regions that want to speed up these projects is also a very important work that we do. And I think it's connecting these different stakeholders, making them exchange their experiences, sharing best practices. That's also, so to say, how you can react to uncertainties. What have you done in your community? What has your mayor already done? The mayor of the next community often wants to, so to say, do the same. Yeah, I hope this answered your question.
And many more as well.
Yeah.
and leads to even more questions because, yeah.
And now you all know the Sachstandsbericht.
Now we know.
And you can Google it and read more. There's a short summary that's enough for you to read.
No, just interesting, because you started sort of with basically the disaster which we are facing, and then it turned gradually more optimistic because lots of things are already happening. But if you read all the climate change reports, basically all they say we should have actually done stuff yesterday or 10 years ago. So if we're talking about time now, this is the question of do we have to change our approach? Can't we afford these timescales which we are used to because we have to be so fast? We have to be climate neutral. We have to reduce carbon emissions basically yesterday. And also something I'm really always struggling with, and I haven't really found an answer. How do we do this as a democratic society when we have elections every 4 years, which means you have before the elections, nothing happens because everyone is campaigning, and afterwards nothing happens because there's coalition talks for half a year, and we actually cannot afford to wait that long, and maybe we will have to have some kind of emergency planning for these things. So what are your, do you have any optimistic answers to that?
Any optimistic considerations? Yeah. I think there is of course so much more to solving climate change than what we can do as designers, but of course I will stick to the field that we have influence on. If you think of the different layers of an area, there are certain things that you can replace, that you know that you're going to replace them in 10, 20 years. For instance, any furniture on the street is not likely to stay much longer than 20, 30 years maybe. But for instance, other elements are they should stay a lot longer. For instance, if you plant a tree, you shouldn't plant a tree for 30 years. You should plant a tree for 100 years, or 400 years, preferably. And then if you take a look at any random street in the city, there's so much going on underground, all cables and pipes and so on. If you redesign an area, I think when you make a master plan, also make an underground master plan. Make sure that what you place in a certain position can stay in that position for a long time. I think that also increases the potential of the trees that we plant. We don't plant trees that never get old, but we plant trees that can stay for a long time. I think that would already make a big impact.
Also, like as a landscape architect, I guess you also like a different approach to time and change, because when a project is finished for you, it's never finished because the trees are just small, and there's not really one point where it's perfect. It's sort of, it grows. Yeah. It's natural for you.
I think that is also the reason why, let's say, a lot of, let's say, the urban planning kind of offices in the Netherlands, but also in France, kind of developed very strongly out of landscape offices. Because it's about time, it's about processes, it's about growing processes, and also looking really on long term. But what you mentioned, I think, is, let's say, I know you're doing a lot, kind of with the already in all this kind of, but I think it's really crucial. We have to be faster. I'm a very impatient person, but I also see what's happening, and let's say we're too slow. And these are political decisions. You also mentioned a crucial point. Kind of political cycles should not be relevant for strategic long-term planning. Means on a certain level, and I think there's a bit different system in the Netherlands with Staatssecretaries and so on, kind of they stay because of their, let's say, they're not elected because of their profession and their knowledge. And then there are also political, and sure, there are also this political cycle. It's also not very, very well at the moment how it is going, but we have to look into planning. Strategic long-term planning has to be loose of political cycles, because this needs time and this needs continuation. And I think everybody knows that the notion of Nachhaltigkeit comes out of a generation process of growing woods in forests. This is over generations, and we have to plan like that. But we also, I think, have to have kind of on a country level, and I think that is intrinsic. It's also in the Netherlands, for instance, the most important, let's say, ministry is Rijkswaterstaat, which is in charge of the water and the streets, because this is really, really crucial to survive. And they have a lot of power. We have here on a country level, let's say, no really regulation, so each mayor can do this, kind of there's on a, and there we have to really have a strategy, kind of a vision, and then kind of we can be faster. But this has to happen, and these are political decisions. They are not comfortable. They also, let's say, we know certain kind of mayors, kind of very well known in Paris, they took the risk to change. Paris is a completely different city today. But it was necessary kind of to take this risk of being not anymore elected. But she had an enormous impact on the city. It's amazing to see. And also Copenhagen is completely changed, you know, kind of, we have to really think about that. And I know the project, that was Argentinierstraße, I saw the renderings. And what you said is crucial. Each 15, 20 years, we have to refurbish, not on top, but we have to kind of change the channels, kind of, whether it's energy, whether it's electricity. But how do we organize this, stable that, kind of on a keep corridor free for trees? It's possible, but we have to do it.
Also, like, if we talk about how planning and politics intersect, of course, like politicians always want the finished result because they can sort of stand in front of it and be photographed, and you don't really want to be photographed in front of a construction site. You know? Well, we know that very well with our local representative in Vienna. Sorry. But yeah.
It's everywhere like that. I think the crucial thing is kind of, I think that's interesting. And I know that from a city planner, she's now in Baden. She was here also in the very early beginning. I came to Vienna in a discussion with Christa Reicher, Barbara Meyer. She said, you know, if I have no money, I have this small kind of suburbia village of Zurich, I have no money at all. So if I know that kind of there's an infrastructure project coming in a city, I'm there. And then I look into how can I improve, and then I bring this to the mayor and say, okay, this add-on you do, and then kind of next time you can cut the lint and kind of make a nice photograph. It's possible. But it's really about the really strong infrastructure kind of aspects. This is about the tube system, it's about the S-Bahn system, it's about the railway system that has to be planned together with landscape architects or with urban planners or kind of to integrate it. And we have very good examples in the city of Vienna, which are the kind of Otto Wagner S-Bahn-Bögen, we just have to go back to what was done kind of ages ago.
I'd like to bring us back at the last question before we open it up to the audience, also on the subject of time. In what way can we sort of, because Ute, you said we have to be faster, and we have tools like tactical urbanism, where you could say you have like these quick and dirty planning tools, where you just, like we have like in the super blocks, where you don't finish it up, you just put up maybe some barriers and see, okay, does this work? Like they did with the Marie-Hilfer-Straße before they made the real plan, we block it up and we see, does it work? And then we improvise and then we see, and then we do the real planning. Can we sort of extend these approaches? And when are they useful and when are they not useful? Sort of have these sort of tactical, quick strategies?
I would not only talk tactical planning, I think there is really something between informal and formal planning. And let's say that a lot of your work and also our work, and I think we also collaborate on this Mehrwert Kanalzone, is informal planning. And because the formal planning needs a lot of time till, let's say, it goes through all the kind of legislation procedures. And I think we need to do both. And I think there's enormous potential of allowing, let's say, this bottom-up kind of initiatives and tactical urbanism, how you name it, kind of to really realize and test, because it's possible. We can also, I think, in quite some districts in Vienna, you could take out smaller streets, all these Halbgassen, you can take out of the traffic system. Let's say the individual transport traffic system. Doesn't mean that kind of fire brigade and blue light kind of can get in and out. So this is all possible, but they don't need to have a paved street. And there are proposals kind of doing that, and you have then also kind of space for green in front of the house. You can also drive in if you move, but for the rest, the car stays out of the streets. And I think there's a lot of potential also in, so to say, greening the city, getting a green porosity into the city and changing the microclimate within the city very, very quickly. So it doesn't need to be such a lot of effort very often. For instance, in Rotterdam, kind of they allow, and I think it's all over the Netherlands, kind of the city allows kind of the people they live there to take out the first two tiles, concrete tiles in front of their house. To use this kind of space for greenery, to put a bench outside, whatever. This is amazing. It changed a lot of streets kind of completely. When I mentioned this here, and that was very interesting for me to listen to that, because it's a completely different approach. Wait a second. And then the kind of city hands over the responsibility to the private owners. So, yes, and they have an advantage of it. Not a problem, but it seems to be a problem here in the mindset. And I think we need to also change this mindset. Kind of, we are all responsible. We are also kind of paying, let's say, taxes, and we are also responsible kind of for our city. And we can take action if the city allows it. And these streets kind of transformed by, and you can even bring in as a kind of collective a project that can be realized, which is not easy for the city planning department if there are no planners involved, but it's happening. And I think there is a lot of potential kind of to transform the city.
Because that's about also about who has control and who is ready to sort of give up the control in certain areas. Give up
control. I think that is exactly what kind of, let's say, planning is bottom up. It's here completely controlled. And I heard this morning, which I found a very interesting notion of a student, said kind of, man möchte gerne Reibung vermeiden. And I thought, okay, interesting. It's a different kind of translation of to let's say loosen kind of to let go a bit the control. But Reibung kind of generates energy. So maybe we have to embrace that to a certain extent to allow for urbanity in the city and change.
Yeah, I think informal use of public space, I think it can be done in multiple moments in the process. I think indeed it could be prior to an actual project is realized. It's like a temporary use of a space. I think there's good examples of that. But then in this former railway park that we've designed in the east of Utrecht, Park Oosterspoorbaan, we specifically said that we wanted to design only a simple framework. And next to that framework, in the case of a railway line, a framework is quite a linear park, of course, but next to this park, there was always space for people to come up with initiatives, to do their own thing. So the park we designed, we liked it, and it's quite nice if you ask me. But next to that, there's also sports facilities that people arranged themselves with funding of the municipality. There's an additional eco ribbon, they call it, added to it. So which is like all kinds of shrubbery. There's a weekly market in one of the playgrounds adjacent to the park. So it can show that it's also something that can grow over time. You can also cater for it. You can design for it.
Yeah, so the whole aspect also of caring and repairing is also coming into that. I would like to give up control of the narrative now to the room. Are there questions, suggestions, short-term speeches in a very short time frame? Maybe there's a question here.
Hello? Oh, okay. Wow, now I'm so nervous all of a sudden. Hello, my name is Ernst. I'm also architect and part of a small collective. We do interdisciplinary planning approaches. I found your presentation very interesting, Bas. Also from the point of view that you said that the public, they were always very skeptical about this motorway. So in a way, this public skepticism was also part of the planning process, I interpret it. My question to you is, whose idea was it to bring back the river? Was that part of the competition that I presume you entered and won? Was it already given? So who were the actors involved? Who were the most important actors involved in this transformation? That would be the question to you. And then to Ute and to Nicole, what, from your experience, what are the most important preconditions of transformation of public spaces? What are the most crucial things that need to be there in order to have something amazing like this project happen?
Thanks for the question. Very short answer. It was mainly the municipality and inhabitants that came up with this asking for it. They asked for it, absolutely. So it was kind of bottom up and top down at the same time.
I think for, let's say, transformation of public space, I think kind of we have first to face or kind of to really acknowledge that public space and streetscapes are for several kind of people and also kind of non-human spaces. And at the moment, let's say public space is not treated as an urban space, it's treated as a mobility space. And especially with a focus on one road. If we talk about, and you saw that also, let's say New Hochkaterijnen was like Eindhoven, like Rotterdam, a completely, let's say, automobile accessed and friendly kind of stations, and they transformed them all. In Rotterdam, they even built, prior to the station, a 3 or 4 story, even 5-story parking garage under the Kruiskade, and transformed the station into a very well accessed kind of by bicycles, by public transport, kind of a mobility node. This car parking is empty because cars cannot get there anymore, and it's also good that they don't get there anymore. Unfortunately, the parking was already built. But let's say we have to, if we look to stations here, kind of they are all very well accessed by individual transport. This is the wrong, let's say, approach. And we really have to think about where do we allow for traffic, how far they come, how close they come to public transportation nodes. It's not kind of at all kind of, let's say, a plaidoyer for no cars in the city, but where are they kind of and where are they not? And I think there we really can transform a lot, kind of in front of Eindhoven Airport, kind of we diminish a street at the moment from 110 meters to 40 width. It's possible. Sure, there's a lot of parking also involved, slip roads, kind of special public transport. So we can transform the streets heavily, kind of thinking about kind of a multimodal approach. And it's very interesting, we can look into researches by Global Street Design Guidelines that a multimodal street kind of has more than double the frequency and efficiency than a monofunctional road. And we just have to really acknowledge that and kind of transform this public urban spaces into multimodal kind of spaces where we also can walk, where even kind of greenhouse place, where we have even maybe playing fields, whatever it's, we just have to think about it differently. But it needs a political decision.
I would say I would choose one aspect, and for me an important precondition is to consider, or what I see if I think of a lot of our projects actually in public space, is to consider the dimension of spatial and environmental justice. Coming again to the Sachstandsbericht, but we don't know that only from there, but we know it from other sources as well. The climate crisis affects vulnerable groups and low-income groups the most. And I think, for me, a really important precondition is dealing with that aspect. And there is a few very, I think, interesting examples. For example, the city of Linz, they do a climate analysis of their city. They did that. And then they overlayered that with a socio-economic analysis of the city, which gives them the timeline where to act first. So basically they would choose spaces that would heat up the most and would still be combined with the population that has the highest risk or the highest vulnerability. Another very for me interesting project is the refurbishment of the Alois-Lueger-Platz in Linz. It's in the Olympic Village in Innsbruck. It's basically a square from the 1980s or 90s, so it's not that old actually. And it was also a very fancy architectural project. It had some greenery, but somehow in the end the money was up and they couldn't do the greenery. And it was a space that looked really fancy. It was a whole huge 400 square meter space, totally concreted with a few fancy lines. And this research project, they refurbished the whole square. And the Olympic Village is it's so many interesting aspects. It's a very ethnically diverse area, even though it's in this traditional county Tyrol. You might know that from skiing. So it's a very unexpected space actually. And the Olympic Village has a lot of clubs. So the most clubs in this village, in this city, are in the Olympic Village. And in the project, there was also a parking space underneath, also like it's in the Utrecht station. And that was also a difficulty, how to green this space if you have a parking space underneath. And there was a very long process where they included these different groups. And throughout the process, the researchers told me that they had the chance to talk with people about climate change. And this really abstract notion, or even they were maybe a bit skeptical about it, they could really deal with this topic, and they could say how it affects these people. And in the end, they refurbished it. I think it's a really great design because it included also a lot of wishes. The city of Innsbruck has also established a very good team that deals with participation processes now. And also in the end, they didn't only refurbish the square, but next to it there was a greenland, and it was a bit shabby and a bit run down, but it had these great old trees, so they still cleaned it up. And then adjacent to that is the Olympic Park, which means that now in the summer when it's really hot, you have a continuous way that is more cool, and you can come to this park in a more, in a finer way, so to say, and more, And then what I see, is that it always takes someone who drives the project, and I think this stands for many things. And I have one last thing that is really important, because coming back to the notion of democracy, and I think this refers to that, what is important when you have to, when you want to realize a public space, not maybe a public space, but a public landscape. I still think that laws are important. And I think there were a few laws in the last years when it comes to energy and materials. It's the Green Deal and the Fit for 55, but also the EU natural registration law is it's a political commitment, for biodiversity and also climate change adaptation. So I think laws are, so to say, the heart of a democracy, I would say, and are still also important in that.
Okay, thanks.
Can I add one thing to that? Now you're talking politics. I think that's the great thing about public space. It doesn't matter what you vote for, very left-winged or very right-winged. Public space is public. So that's the only space where everybody can meet each other, and that's the great power of it as well. So that's something to always keep in mind.
Yeah. If it's not privatized.
If it's not privatized.
I think we have more questions from the audience, so maybe we can collect 2, 3. Here, and at the back.
Thanks for the polity. So I can just add something. I'm Eric. Thanks for mentioning Pro Bach, where we were part of the team.
Thanks for the name.
Yeah. And my mention is when we talk about framework and adaptive planning, we still have one kind of idea. We have to save grounds, so we have to be strict. And I would ask, how could you, or which would be the strategy to combine these two, to be adaptable, but not to show adaptiveness in, so to say, landscape to secure areas? And one question to all, who knows the Austrian adaptation strategy? Oh. Thanks. It's 15 years old. It was published 15 years ago. And there are a lot of recommendations for planning, for strategy, for exchange, even for rainwater management in the cities and for the open city, open spaces, how to deal with it. And it's really shocking that these kind of overall strategies are barely known. I'm sorry. So my question again was, how to combine adaptiveness and a strict framework for the green open space.
Okay, we'll take another question at the back, and then we go back on stage.
Hi, my name is Roland Romano from Radlobby Austria, the Austrian Cycling Federation. My question is concerning, I will start with a statement that I think we have quite good public spaces in a linear meaning. Argentinierstraße was already mentioned, or Praterstraße, but Austria is lacking of a transformation of the small streets in the neighborhoods. And my question would be, how can we evolve from the next high-level, expensive street redesign to a transformation of quarters? What examples can you name, or what instruments? And maybe also what funding schemes are currently open for cities to apply for transformation of neighborhoods? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we have like your general question with how to sort of bring adaptiveness and a framework together. I got that right? And also how to sort of move from larger linear spaces to smaller roads and to developing neighborhoods.
I would say, let's say adaptable, let's say in flexible frameworks, system relevant kind of infrastructure, and I include there green and blue infrastructure and natural kind of infrastructure and networks, kind of really discussing systems instead of linear lines. So we have to think in systems, that's one aspect, and the crucial strategic infrastructure has to be, let's say, kind of secure to a certain extent, but we also there, like I mentioned earlier, there are, let's say, these gray zones in between at the fringes. And I think there kind of is a possibility to also kind of adapt, and how can, let's say, the citizens really kind of use these spaces. And at the moment, very often there are kind of very strict hard lines, and there's not a zone of being, let's say, in a dialogue with the natural aspects, but also kind of the human needs of, and we also need to think about kind of what kind of spaces we provide within these networks. In a green and blue infrastructure network that goes through the city, which we kind of, this is done by the Katharine Single, but also other kind of lines, and looking into that kind of, because this will really work very positively concerning climate adaptation, but also biodiversity increase in a city, and the microclimate will get better. But there are also kind of spaces where we maybe kind of should stay out as humans, and because, let's say, we cause also a lot of damage. So what are really natural spaces that could be also retention areas? They also have a different function, but we have to always think in multi-coded spaces and not one thing for one purpose. I think this is kind of a bit the crucial thing in that sense. And I think at the moment, this is still, okay, this has to be on a street. Okay, sorry, electric kind of water, whatever, there's nothing possible. If we organize it, there's more possible. And we can also narrow streetscapes and widths, because then we don't drive so fast. And then the others can also cross over a street, and we have space for something extra. I think, let's say, it's if we, let's say, really look to ourselves and perceive ourselves how we, let's say, maneuver through a city with a car or with not a car or with a bicycle, then we know what kind of spaces we would need and how fast we can or slow we can also still go through a street. And I mention always a kind of an example, probably Mike knows. In Stuttgart, the Theodor-Heuss-Straße was a kind of an inner city highway, constantly congested. 3 pedestrian zebras kind of transformed and urbanized both fringes, but also kind of stopped the congestion, because the flow flows, but slower. And it's working, and it's even better for the city and the kind of the whole, let's say, grade level kind of program, but also on top. So I think it's about these kind of, let's say, systematic kind of approaches. And for your question, let's say, I think if we stop thinking in about one street or second street, I think that is really crucial. What I learned from the former right hand of Anne Hidalgo, Marion Valère, who is partly kind of, I think, even not German or Austrian, they looked into that kind of systematically. So it was not one street or a second. They really looked into the system of streets all over the city. Kind of first of all, let's say the big lines, then the big squares, and also the small streets all in front of schools all over the city. Because then we can scale up and we can be fast. It's not about one single project, it's about a systematic approach.
I think we could probably learn that from like mobility planning, because they always have the whole system and the whole network in the plan. Any more questions, statements?
Can I still
something
to
we've
that,
forgotten? Bas?
Yeah, I want to add one thing to it. I have the feeling that it takes a while sometimes before it switches on. But I very much agree with the systemic approach, and then also I believe that all the way at the end of the system, at the front door, that's a very crucial spot. How necessary is it that you can actually park your car in front of your house? What if your street becomes carless and there will be a perfect place to park your bike in front of your house, and for your car you need to walk 50 or 100 meters? I think it will already change the mindset of people to choose for the bike over the car. And of course, it's not always possible, but with these small interventions, I think you can change a whole system in the end.
So again, like simple, quick and dirty solutions with big effects. Yeah. One more at the back.
Hello, thank you for the lecture and the very interesting discussion. I think this project is a very good example of how Donau Canal and the Wien River could look like, and I'm just wondering, since many years, how these areas could be transformed and could look much lusher and more beautiful with more nature and less cars. And then I talked to a city representative from the ruling party since many years, and then he's telling me like, yeah, but we have many old voters, and they're kind of used to having their cars, in front of their house and moving around with their cars. So, we always come back to the politics, and these politicians trying to, meet demands of everybody. And when I think of that, I kind of get depressed about the future of Donau Canal. You can see these aesthetic changes being done, but not really something very deep or like a big change. So, and yeah, that was maybe just a comment, and maybe like a question for Nicole and Ute. What do you think? Is there a chance, or is there a probability for something similar to happen in Vienna, considering Donau Canal? Yeah.
I strongly believe it is. But let's say, as a citizen body, kind of a civic kind of society, you have to ask this very, very honestly with a big group from the politicians. Because this was happening in Utrecht. This also happened, by the way, I was never thinking that the Gutbürgertum in Stuttgart will go on the street to protest. They did, at a certain point. But then things changed. It was a bit too late at that point, for that operation. But I think there is a possibility, to change, but we have to ask for it. They will not move if we don't ask for it really with a big crowd. There is a power, let's say, of this kind of more bottom-up or kind of collectiveness in the Netherlands, or the direct democracy in Switzerland, that people can really reject a project. But we also can do this everywhere in a democracy. But we have to group together and really ask for it. And sure, I also told once the mayor that what they are doing at the moment, it's not enough. Because he said, yeah, we do this Argentinierstraße and so on. So first of all, I saw it, and I'm a bit unsatisfied about the amount of trees in the street. It's a very nice cycling street, I agree. It's pretty dangerous, by the way, if you look at that. If you would go with bus to that kind of cycling street, he will tell you, oh, wait a second. And there are really very critical kind of crossings. This would not happen in the Netherlands, and also not in Copenhagen. And the first thing that was finished were the kind of car parkings. And then we had to wait a long time for the bicycle racks, and it's a little bit the same number than it was before. And we have some trees, but not very many. And the visualizations were much stronger green. And I think there we really have to ask for, because the city needs it. We are sitting on an incredible heating island. Some trees and this kind of metal racks, even if they're, and with some kind of vertical green, they will not do the job, unfortunately. This is really the point. This linear singer with a lot of substantial greens standing in soil that keeps the humidity and also kind of gives it back, kind of also has an impact. Single trees in Baumscheiben, sorry, we will not do the job.
Okay, we're going to have a site visit with bus at the Argentinische tomorrow, 9 a.m.
Sounds like
in morning rush hour. Nicole, the question was to you. Do you see any success in this very large scale like redevelopment of the Donaukanal? You're not allowed to say it.
It's very hard from the national level to comment on the local level, but I see, Ute seems very positive.
Let's say we have to. Let's say I think at a certain point it's not hurting enough here at the moment. But this summer was not that kind of extreme, but kind of the last summer, kind of I feel that if I'm commuting in and out the city, and also my colleague Susan Ahn, who's commuting from Munich to Vienna, and the difference in temperature is always more than 5 degrees. And if you arrive here during the night, you're feeling like you're arriving in a kind of oven, because you feel the stone kind of evaporating, kind of the energy, the embodied energy. So we really need to bring green in that city. Kind of this goes fast. It goes incredibly fast. We faced it last autumn. Kind of it's a year ago with the river going nearly over. So we have to change the city, the public space, and in a system, and not just some points somewhere. But probably it needs to really hurt till we really get going. And we know that kind of even already in the 70s we knew, and we didn't change enough. So
we need a bit more suffering to become optimistic again.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's say it's really we just move if it's really kind of more. We are already over. Yeah. You know, it's too late already. We have to get going really faster.
I believe as well that these best practice images, these best practice projects showing the before and after can help you in a discussion with anybody who would say, it's not possible. No, but blah, blah, blah. Any reason you could think of. There's so many reasons to not do it. For instance, these small towns in the Netherlands where the shopping centers in the center of the city where you would make them smaller, there were always shop owners who would say, yeah, but if you can't come here by car here anymore, I'm going to go bankrupt. And in the end, there are lots of examples in the Netherlands and also in other countries where it shows that creating a pleasant place to stay also makes people hang out there and visit the shop anyway, also if they can't get there by that freaking car. So in the end, it's a bit backward thinking, but not being able to reach a shop with the car doesn't mean that people don't go there anymore. So it's a no but turning it into a yes but.
There's a good example here in the city.
So we're learning from best practice examples is what we're here for. Yeah. Well, I think it's almost 9 o'clock, and it says 9 o'clock here. So we're adhering to the subject of time. And thank you all very much. And I really like this performative aspect of this clock going louder and louder over there. So the very urgency which is communicated here. It's very good. Maybe we can put some oil into it tomorrow. So thank you all for being here, also online. And of course, you all have to read the Sachstandsbericht and report back at Urbanize headquarters by 10 a.m. tomorrow with a summary. And then please follow the Urbanize program, which is fantastic in the next days. Thank you.